Shut up and sit down.
Imagine you have to follow up after the most beloved president in history. What do you do? What do you do to make sure you get rave reviews? Silence all of your critics with social media posts? Ignore the haters and just move on? Or pass a law that silences free speech? Find out what happens to the first test of our freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Find out now. Welcome to Learning with Sprayberry, where we make social studies fun, easy, and educational. Thanks for joining us. Before we dive into the Alien and Sedition Acts, I'm going to hit you with a little bit of background. In 1796, Washington announces he's not going to take a third term. So the elections now featured two brand new candidates. The frontrunners are John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Despite Washington's farewell warnings, political parties, they developed. The Federalists supported John Adams, while the Democratic Republicans fell behind Jefferson. Because political parties are what they are, both sides began mudslinging. Federalists accused Democratic Republicans of supporting the bloody violence of the French Revolution. Amazing how fast we forget our own revolution. The Democratic Republicans said that the Federalists are too closely aligned with Britain. Then the arguments got personal. Adams was accused of being a coward during the war, while Jefferson was accused of being a Francophile. That sounds dirtier than it is. It just means a person who's really obsessed with French culture.
And they say I'm a Francophile. At least they know I know where France is.
Which, to be honest, he was. It's amazing how polite the insults were back then. In the end, Adams wins the election due to heavy support from New England states. After the election, the storm created by the French Revolution wasn't gone. Federalists still had to deal with the fact that people in the US supported France. Many because France supported us. Because this idea was connected to the Democratic Republicans, support for the Federalists wavered quite a bit under Adams. In order to limit the arguments against the Federalist Party, Adams convinced Congress to pass the Alien and Sedition Acts. The purpose was to theoretically strengthen national security. Where have we heard that before? These acts contain a few different parts. Let's go over them. To start with, the Alien and Sedition Acts are really several different laws that are sort of wrapped all together. You have the Alien Friends Act, the Alien Enemies Act, and then lastly, the Alien and Sedition Act. Oh, don't forget the Naturalization Act. Federalists felt that immigrants were stirring up trouble for the Federalist Party. One Federalist congressman stated, well, the U.S. shouldn't invite hordes of wild Irishmen, nor the turbulent and disorderly of all the world to come here with a basic view to distract our tranquility.
I don't think this boy's got all his marbles.
Initially, when immigrants moved to the United States, they had to be a resident for only 5 years before they were considered a citizen. One part of these acts was the Naturalization Act, which increased the naturalization time from 5 years to 14 years. This was in part due to the fact that Adams believed much of the negative press came from immigrants moving into the United States and stirring up trouble. This eliminated their ability to vote against him. Because the limit was initially 5 years, that meant a person could move in and be able to vote relatively quickly. But with a 14-year limit, they'd have to wait almost 3 terms to vote. Another piece was the Alien Friends Act. That gave the president power to deport foreigners that he deemed dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States. Adams wanted to take care of spies and foreigners who were from countries that America was at war with. But oddly enough, for an act designed to deal with war, this law applied during peacetime. So consider this. If you move to the US, you're probably not as heavily connected to your home country. However, this law means you could be removed simply because of where you came from, not necessarily because of your political views. Especially if the deciding factor is whether or not the president thinks you're an enemy. Up next is the Alien Enemy Act, which was similar to the Alien Friend Act, except that it applied specifically during wartime. This law also added the ability to arrest and imprison aliens. We call aliens immigrants now, who came from countries who we were actively at war with. Again, this relies on the president deciding if you're a danger. That's quite a lot of power residing in one person. Lastly, the Alien and Sedition Acts gets their last part from the Sedition Acts. This law was an attack on free speech. It says that anyone who tries to intimidate a government official or attempt to start an insurrection, a riot, or unlawful assembly, or a combination of those can be put on trial, and if found guilty will have a fine not exceeding $5,000 and be imprisoned from anywhere between 6 months to 5 years. This part isn't the part that people objected to. If you try to intimidate an elected official into not doing their job, it should be a crime. The next part, though, is sticky. If a person writes, prints, utters, or publishes anything that is considered malicious writings against the United States, Congress, or the President with the purpose of defaming those parties, they are guilty of sedition. It also applies to anyone who helps those ideas. So, an editor who says something defamatory about the government can be found guilty, but so can the newspaper that prints it. The reason is that these writings could stir up hate or rebellion within the United States. Unfortunately, the whole purpose of the First Amendment is to guarantee free press. Elected officials need to be called out when their actions are not in the best interest of the United States. However, this law labels the press as an enemy.
Press is the enemy. The press is the enemy. The press is the enemy. The establishment is the enemy. The professors are the enemy. The professors are the enemy. Write that in the blackboard 100 times.
As punishment, anyone who violated this law could face up to a $2,000 fine and imprisonment up to 2 years. The application of this law led to 20 Democratic Republican newspaper editors being arrested. One Democratic Republican representative was imprisoned for his views on Adams, but he was re-elected while sitting in his jail cell. Keep in mind that this law was passed in 1798. We just passed the Bill of Rights guaranteeing free speech in 1791. We passed those laws remembering exactly how England tried to take away our rights. And now, 7 years later, we're doing the same thing to ourselves that England did to us. Well, I know what you're asking. Didn't the Supreme Court overturn this law? It's literally the definition of unconstitutional. The real problem is that the Supreme Court hadn't really created the power of judicial review. Judicial review doesn't actually pop up until Marbury versus Madison. Finally, the Supreme Court justices at the time were so heavily Federalist, they wouldn't have pushed against this law in the first place. The Alien and Sedition Acts bring up a very relevant question. Do we give up our rights, our guaranteed rights, in order to become safer? What do you think? Should U.S. citizens be expected to give up their rights in order to feel more safe? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, click like. If you want to see more content, click subscribe. I drop a new video every week, so make sure you hit the bell so that you get the notifications. And as always, thanks for watching Learning with Sprayberry, where we make social studies fun, easy, and educational. Thanks.